Welcome to Reach Your Dew Point, the podcast that explores what it takes to make your next move, whether you're thinking about starting a business, changing careers, or achieving something you've been dreaming about. I'm your host, Roy Atkinson. We'll be sharing stories from many who have found their own dew point and eliminated the barriers to their success. Listen up. You'll learn something that will help you reach your dew point. And my guest for this episode is Leslie Oflahaven. As the owner of eWrite since 1996, Leslie has been writing content and teaching customized writing courses for Fortune 500 companies, government agencies, and nonprofit organizations. As a result of her work, eWrite clients improve their customer satisfaction ratings, reduce training cycles, improve productivity, and limit legal risk. Leslie is a frequent conference presenter and workshop leader, and in 2017, Leslie became a lynda.com instructor and launched two courses: How to Write a Customer Service Email and Customer Service Writing for Social Media. She's the co-author of Clear, Correct, Concise Email, a writing workbook for customer service agents. For the last 3 years, Leslie has been listed as one of ICMI's top 50 thought leaders who help educate, inspire, and motivate the customer service industry. Leslie holds a BA in English and Rhetoric from the University of Illinois and a Master of Science in Education from Northern Illinois University. She lives in Silver Spring, Maryland, with her family and her dog, Moxie, who barks concisely, of course. Leslie, welcome to Reach Your Dew Point. Great to have you on. I'm so pleased.
It's my pleasure to be your guest, my friend Roy.
Now, we've probably gone through a few career changes along the way, between us more than one for sure. I haven't talked about my own yet, but we'll get to that episode later in the series. What might be some dew points that you've arrived at during your career?
Really only arrived at one when I became convinced of what I wanted to make my career. So that was a dew point that I was lucky enough to have as a senior in college. A little bit late, but I picked up and moved on. And the second one was when I left my first career, which was high school English teacher, to form my own company. So perhaps I've had fewer changes than a person of my age and experience in the workforce. There have been two, and one I had as an undergrad.
That's awesome, and actually that's kind of early. I think a lot of people who do undergrad and then make a career choice wind up changing several times before they arrive at what they think they're going to do for the rest of the time or whatever. Mm-hmm. So when you were thinking, let's tackle that one first. As an undergraduate, looking ahead at what you were going to do for a living, what were the things that you looked at, and who were you listening to at the time? Were you going by peer input, by guidance from faculty? What were you thinking?
Well, I had one concrete idea of myself at the start of my undergraduate career, that I would be a fiction writer. And I got a degree in creative writing. And freshman year, I was gung-ho producing fiction all the time. Sophomore year, I was gung, but maybe not ho. I wasn't producing as much. And then in my junior year, I had an utter crisis of identity because I loved writing, but I didn't have anything to say anymore. And what was supposed to be my passion and my career, I was stuck. I was stymied, and we don't want to mock the grief of a 19-year-old because it was very real to me, but I spent a lot of time thinking about, I'm meant to be a real writer, and I don't have anything to say. Real writers have something to say. And while I could kind of drag out a few stories and pass my classes, I really didn't have anything to say. And when I was a senior, pretty close to graduation, I had a Shakespeare seminar, and we were sitting around the table, and the professor invited us all to introduce ourselves on the first day. And we went around the table, and a man sitting across the table from me said, something like, "Hello, my name's Robert, and I'm a secondary English teaching major." And I honestly thought, that's it. I was a senior in college, and in that moment, I said to myself, that's what I want to do. I want to be a writing teacher. I do not want to be a writer. And I have a painful year or year and a half of being unable to produce any writing that I really respect to prove it. So I changed my major and got a master's in education, and it was the right decision from the moment I made it in that senior seminar to the moment I became a teacher, which was about 2 years later, a little less than 2 years later.
And that becoming a teacher 2 years later was a function of the time to get the master's degree plus the time it took you to fit yourself into a teaching job somewhere.
Indeed. I had to do student teaching and I had to earn my master's. Yes. Mm-hmm.
What kind of a school was it that you wound up being in at that first job?
The first school I taught in was in a community about 40 miles west of Chicago, and it was a school that was about the same size as the high school I attended. It was a big school, somewhere around 3,000 students. It probably had a wider range of student abilities than the one that I attended as a teenager myself, but it was a very good school. And when I was a student teacher there, I was allowed to be a student teacher in all of the advanced courses. And when I was a first year teacher there, they put me with the least capable, least willing, most illegal students they had. So I had one class of ninth grade English where all the men had a beard. They had all of the 19-year-old ninth graders in one class. And that was a tough year. Every teacher you've ever met has stories about their first year of teaching. That was a tough year. But I changed schools. The following year, I got a better paying job in a swankier school district that was quite well funded. And I had 4 very happy years teaching there, and then 4 more after I moved to the DC area, teaching in suburban Virginia.
So you've got a history. We won't talk about your opinions of men with beards. I'm just going to skate right over that one.
Ninth graders with beards.
Ninth graders with beards. That I didn't have mine quite yet, I don't think. But that's a substantial history of teaching.
Yes.
But you didn't stay there.
Yeah.
You moved on and you moved in the direction of pursuing what you do now. And maybe you can describe a little bit about what that is, because people might not grab it on the first try coming from me, but they'll get it coming from you because of plain language and plain speaking, which is what you do. So tell us about that.
Yes, thanks, Roy. My company is called eWrite. That's E-WRITE. And so, I formed this company in 1996, back when we used to put the hyphen after the E. eWrite is a writing, training, and consulting company. And broadly, our mission is to help people learn to write well at work. So we offer customized training courses to help people of all stripes, of all roles, write better at work. And the way you and I know each other, of course, is because for about the last 20 years, a good portion of the people we work with are frontline customer service agents or technical support analysts. And the reason that I offer training for those people is because I respect the difficulty of their work, and I know their employers count on them to be very versatile writers, very deft and productive writers, and that's really difficult. And I'm here to make the task of writing easier for people who have to do it at work. You mentioned plain language. I would say plain language is the name of my community. And I am not the only consultancy type person who works in this area, but plain language is the name of about a 50-year-old communication movement that says that the merit of the writing, the worthwhileness of the writing, is judged by how well the intended reader can understand and act on the writing. So back in the day, before plain language, we often judged the quality of the writing by how erudite the writer was, and how well referenced the writer was, and how impressive the writer was. In this modern approach to writing, we say we are always writing for our readers. And the way we judge whether we've succeeded is if our intended reader can understand and act on what we've written.
And I see the tie-in, of course, with customer service there, because I've always thought in my writing that part of the deal was that my customer service contribution was that I had to make it intelligible to the reader. I was providing good customer service by making the language clear and not arcane. But we didn't come here to talk about language. We could talk about, you and I could talk language from now until the end of time and not run out of things to say, I think. Let's go back to your decision to move from teaching and into having a business of your own and providing this service to organizations. When you started thinking about that, what were the things that started you moving in that direction, and who were you talking to about it? And I'll elaborate on that question a little more as we go.
Okay. Of course, because you invited me to talk about this topic, I've been thinking about how to express my answers in a tidy and efficient way. And I hope that anyone who's listening won't interpret the tidy way I'm answering now to mean that there was no mess in my head when all of this was happening. There was mess. There's always mess. But I'll tell a tidy story because we don't want the podcast to yawn on for 200 hours here. So I was a high school English teacher for 9 years, and I really loved this career. I never experienced the type of burnout you hear about teachers experience where they lose interest in their work. They lose tolerance and affection for teenagers. I didn't experience any of that. I did experience some resentment sometimes about the hours that I had to commit to the teaching because it was a very time-consuming job. You arrive at work usually at 6:30 or 6 because the school day starts early, and you leave work around 4. And then if you're a high school English teacher whose students' performance come in the form of long essays, you have hours and hours of grading to do and hours of preparation. So when school was in session, I worked, 15 or more hours a day. It was a very time-consuming profession, full of joy, but extremely time-consuming. So maybe in year 8, I said to myself, I actually looked at the salary schedule for teachers because you can see, in most school districts, you can see what the wage increase is going to be out your whole career. And I looked at that and I wasn't dissatisfied with the money I was earning, but the idea that I could predict what my earnings would be till year 37 when I retired gave me a little feeling, if I'm going to make a change, shouldn't I make it earlier rather than later? So I had started to wonder, if there's anything else out there for me, maybe I shouldn't wait to explore it. That didn't go anywhere. I went on a couple job interviews, but didn't go anywhere. And then my first child was born. And so I'm telling the honest truth about the change that I made. I held my daughter and I looked at her and I realized something's got to give. I'm holding the baby. And I thought, well, either you're going to fail at school or you're going to fail at home. This is what I thought, because I couldn't figure out how I would hire a babysitter, sure, for the hours where I was working. Then I would come home and ignore my child. Couldn't figure that out. And I couldn't figure out how I would go to school less than prepared with fewer creative ideas and fewer plans for the future than I had. And I knew what the time cost of that was. I just couldn't figure it out. So Roy, candidly, it was a lack of imagination on my part about how I would remain a confident, creative, and forward-thinking teacher and a competent and loving parent. I just didn't see a way. And so I started to think, well, what I need to do, this is so naive, it's almost childish. What I need to do is work for myself. Because when you work for yourself, your time is your own. That's a joke. I didn't know then, but that's what I thought. And so I reduced the number of classes I was teaching for the following school year, and I started to look for freelance opportunities. Now, I live in the Washington, D.C. area, and there are lots of freelance opportunities to write, and I became a freelance curriculum writer for various Smithsonian museums because I was a competent, experienced teacher. And I also became a freelance writing instructor at a government agency because there's the federal government such a big employer that they have lots of internal, universities, they used to refer to them as. And I started teaching day-long writing courses for 25 adults within the government agencies. I had current pedagogy as a writing teacher, and I had practiced it in a much more taxing setting, a high school English class, than in a professional training setting with 25 adults for 8 hours. So I was really good at it. I had method and backup method and another method to try next Tuesday. And so for about a year, I had this kind of ad hoc freelance career. My income dropped substantially. I had left teaching, but I had income coming in. And one day while I was working at one of the government agencies, another instructor and I struck up a conversation. We really liked each other's company. And she said to me, "Wow, this email thing's really going to change workplace writing." And I said, "Yeah, it is." And then about 6 weeks later, we had incorporated eWrite. And that's the start of the business, in this naive idea that I would be the captain of my own ship as a working person, and the sense that I knew my work as a writing teacher. I knew I was competent there, and that somehow we would make a living. And that's how it started.
So now, as a teacher, and my sister was a teacher and principal for over 40 years, so I know what that game is like. It's not like you get a whole lot of entrepreneurial experience. You are an entrepreneur in a lot of senses because you're running your classes and so forth. But how did you go about learning more about the business aspects of this? Did you have mentors that you leaned on? Did you have people around you who could coach you? What was that process like?
I didn't have mentors or coaches. I was blithe. And this is another part of my makeup. And it certainly was a strong part of my makeup at that time, is I have felt hopeful about the future. And partly because our household has two earners, my husband and I are the dual earners in our household, I knew that we could afford for my salary to drop a certain amount for a certain amount of time. My husband and I did discuss this. How little can I earn this year? How little can I earn next year? Where are we? And we agreed that the first year that I could earn quite little, and I did earn quite little. But no, I did not. My business partner and I did the minimum of business practices that you could imagine, with no mentorship. We incorporated as an LLC. We opened a credit card and a business checking account. We made a website, a very small website, and then we set about giving our services away for a very short time, for about, I don't know, maybe a month or two, and then we started charging. And there are expenses to delivering on-site training programs. Yes, there are expenses, but the biggest expense, of course, is the development time and the time you spend building your business. So we were able to give our time. And we both established that we could go about a year with very low income. And so we didn't soldier on, we jumped in.
So you had no plan B at that point, I take it.
The plan B would have been, if this doesn't earn enough income or work out to be satisfying work that I enjoy, if neither of those things happen in about 18 months, that I would leave this business aside. And I assume I would have returned to teaching. But again, this notion that the future was full of opportunity was so strong with me then. And I had enough recent proof during that period of freelancing that I could probably sell the services. I had a little practice period. I freelanced on and off for about a year. And some of the projects continued. So, for example, the Smithsonian Writing Project. So I sound like, as I describe it, I sound like a dummy. I sound like a moron. But I just had the sense that the world would want what we had to offer. And my business partner, who's named Marilyn, we had quite a compatible partnership, quite satisfying personally and professionally. So there was the sense, I had a strong sense that I wasn't alone.
You said something there that kind of clicked in my head. It was that you were very optimistic about the opportunities that would be available in the future. And do you think that is an essential quality for an entrepreneur? That sounds to me like the entrepreneurial spirit in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm. No, I don't. I don't think that is essential for an entrepreneur. But your question made me realize something. It may be essential for an entrepreneur who isn't prepared by profession or by seeking a mentor to run a business. We always knew, my business partner and I chose a formula together, the two of us sitting across a table, for how much of our income we would hold back to cover overhead or to cover expenses that we wanted to take on for growth. But this wasn't supported by any business practices that we knew of. We just decided together what that percentage would be. And it was enough. From the point we decided how much we were going to have in reserve to the point where she retired in 2011, that amount was fine. And so again, that optimism lubricates a lack of experience. But there are entrepreneurs who may listen to this conversation we're having who aren't innately optimistic, but are courageous about risk. That's not optimism. To me, that's different. And I would say that one of the limits I've had in my business is not being willing to take on a lot of risk, either financial risk or employment risk. So as the years have gone by, now it's a long time, it's 25 years, the essential structure of the business hasn't changed. And that's partly because while I'm extremely optimistic about my contributions for the future, I'm not built to take a lot of financial risk. Or any.
Interesting. Interesting. Because as you say, entrepreneurs do have to have at least some idea that they're going to have to take on some risk. Mm-hmm. I think you're not giving yourself enough credit there, but we'll talk about that some other time. I think that you did a lot of risk assessment before you made the move. You understood how much you had to make. You understood what the trade-offs were going to be. And the upside for you was the ability to have that family connection. And I think that certainly has driven a lot of people to start a business or a practice and do something outside of their work, whether it's a full-time or a part-time job or career that they have.
So, but the joke's on me, and I'm speaking to any woman who's listening to this, and to any man, but as a woman, I'm speaking to any woman. That reason for leaving my teaching job never worked out. The being self-employed never gave me more time with my children. The only kinds of freedom I have, and they are a kind of freedom, is that if I decided that I wanted to go to a lunchtime school event where the reading groups were reading their the books they had written out loud. I didn't have to ask my boss, but I mean, that was naivete and inexperience as both a parent and a self-employed person. That is not the right reason. There is not more freedom. There's less freedom, because in a conventional job where you have an employer, number one, lots of times they gin up the clients for you. I never had to worry where the teenagers were coming from. There'd be a fresh crop. And number two, if you get sick, there's the name for taking time off. If you're self-employed, there is not a name for it. And I have to say, as a self-employed person, I've sometimes seen the ugliest side of human nature when I've been sick, because while my clients care if I don't feel well and want me to feel better, they want that work done. I'm a consultant and they need the work done. And there's no structure for me saying I'm not available right now.
Good points, all. And having been self-employed for a substantial portion of my life, I can certainly agree with a lot of that. So your future, as you see it now, how do you see the market playing out? I know from your activity that you're still doing a tremendous amount of work in this area. What's going on now that keeps you employed and keeps you working in your field?
Well, this is a special question to answer in 2021, because until March 2020, my answers would have been similar year over year, but different from what they are now. So the work that I do that enables me to earn the living I earn is that I do customized training projects for companies. That's mostly the way I earn my living. Though over the last few years, I do some very large writing projects. Sometimes I'll help a company rewrite their library of templates or canned responses for email, chat, social media, and even phone. I help companies maintain their knowledge-based content. And lately, I've been writing a lot of style guides. So style guides for the customer care team to use, or style guides for the web content team, or for the company to use. Brand voice style guides, that's a bigger portion of my work than it was maybe 7-8 years ago. So the current challenge in my business is to make sure that my training offerings continue, that I can continue to offer customized training programs virtually, and that the training programs are equally meaningful to the people who participate in them, and, honestly, equally meaningful to me. And that is the only struggle I'm having right now. My income remained steady during the pandemic. I sat down and had a long talk with myself in the mirror, and I told myself, that's what we're doing here. And I worked hard to make it happen. But I miss being in the same room as people. And so I'm becoming better at each time at being a virtual instructor. My heart is broken a little bit.
And speaking of being in the same room, you and I have on happy occasions crossed paths at various and sundry conferences around the country, and it has always been a pleasure to meet with you and have a chat, even if it was just passing in the hall and stopping to say hello and catch up a little bit. So this has been a real pleasure to talk to you on this particular subject.
Yes.
And I will endeavor to return to your Friday noontime, is it, on Clubhouse?
Yes, Plain Language Weekly. Yes, we just had one today. Oh my goodness, was it interesting. The people who are joining us geography is dead. From everywhere, Ireland, Mumbai, San Antonio, Quebec, everywhere. I love it.
It is absolutely astounding how connected we are in some ways, and as we were just saying, disconnected in others. It's a fascinating world that we live in. Leslie, thank you for taking the time to chat with me on this subject. And I know that we will not only chat again, but we will see each other again soon as live events ramp back up. And thanks for being on Reach Your Dew Point.
It's absolutely my pleasure, Roy. Thank you so much for such thoughtful questions. And it's always an honor to be listened to. But when you listen, it's a deep honor. Thank you, my friend.
Many thanks to my wonderful guest, Leslie Oflahaven. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Reach Your Dew Point.